don't have anything. They're responsible for the lockdowns, forced vaccinations, kids being forced to stay home, people committing suicide, and all the horrors that this country lived through during COVID. Fauci belongs in prison. He should be tried for mass murder, and he should be tried for crimes against humanity. That's how I feel after that hearing. That's how the American people feel.
Whoa, how you doing there, Carice?
Hey, I'm doing okay.
Yeah, if you don't know, this is Sons of Thunder, and today it's also son and daughter of Thunder, and also mother of my granddaughters of Thunder. Corden is out today. I'm doing his day job, unfortunately for him. Today, we're speaking about the House Oversight Committee on COVID. And why don't we just roll the first clip on that there, Skeeter?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Fauci, you were quoted on CBS Face the Nation saying it's easy to criticize, but they're really criticizing science because I represent science. Do you represent science, Mr. Fauci?
I am a scientist who uses the scientific method to gain information.
Yes, you said you represent science. Do you represent science, Mr. Fauci? Yes
Again,
or no? Yes or no?
No, that's not a yes or no
Yes,
answer.
it's a yes or no.
I don't think it is.
Okay, well, we'll take that as a you don't know what you represent.
You gotta love Marjorie Taylor Greene.
Yeah, she is awesome.
Yeah, people say she's nuts and stuff, and you know what? She's a bit bombastic and all that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, she could word things in a more diplomatic sort of way, but she's pretty truthful at the same time.
She gets to the point that matters.
Yeah, and in that particular instance, I remember when he said it. It was on a CBS News program. In fact, I think we have the clip where he quibbles and says, "I didn't say I am science. I represent science." If you would play that clip for us, will you, Skeeter?
Is that there's a distinct anti-science flavor to this. So if they get up and criticize science, nobody's going to know what they're talking about. But if they get up and really aim their bullets at Tony Fauci, well, people could recognize there's a person there, there's a face, there's a voice you can recognize, you see him on television. So it's easy to criticize, but they're really criticizing science because I represent science.
You hear that?
If you criticize Fauci, you're criticizing science.
That's right. If he represents science, I mean, he's the visible representation of science. To criticize him is to criticize science.
Makes sense.
Well, that's quite a claim to make, don't you think?
Yeah.
It takes a bit of arrogance, I think, to say something like that. You know.
Well, and then to deny it later, also.
Well, it's like the Pope. You know, he allegedly represents Christ on earth. He's like saying he's the Pope of science. That's basically what he's saying, and I think that it's just absurd. And you know, this Pope of science, this representative of science, has clearly led us down a lot of terrible and silly and stupid and destructive paths.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you take for, you know, vaccine mandates and whatnot, and making people, you either got to choose your job or you got to choose the jab. You know, one of the two
Shutting
things.
down businesses, killed the economy.
Yeah, wiped out the economy and put people, small businesses out of business and all that sort of thing. In fact, I read a study that said that about 34% of small businesses shut down during the COVID lockups. And something like 60%, probably a little less than that because these stats are kind of old. I couldn't find new ones. 60% of them, of that 35%, did not return after COVID was over. So this had a humongous effect.
Yeah, really sad.
But anyway, let's keep rolling here. We've got a lot of stuff to get through here, and we don't want this to go overly long. Please roll the next clip if you would, Skeeter.
But this, as director of the NIH, you did sign off on these so-called scientific experiments. And as a dog lover, I want to tell you this is disgusting and evil, what you signed off on, and these experiments that happened to beagles paid for by the American taxpayer. And I want you to know Americans don't pay their taxes for animals to be tortured like this. So the type of science that you are representing, Mr. Fauci, is abhorrent, and it needs to stop.
Animal abuse? Should that not be illegal?
I don't know what else you call it. I mean, these beagles, in the first place, you know why they chose beagles to use for these experiments?
Because they're cute and he hates everything wonderful.
My understanding is that of all the breeds of dogs, beagles are the most willing to please human beings. In other words, they'll obey them and they're happy to please them and that sort of thing.
That is sick if I ever heard anything sick.
It's about the saddest thing I ever heard.
We have dominion over the animals, so it's essential that we treat them kindly. So it came as a shock to us to learn that thousands of beagles have been locked up and tortured in a lab in Virginia for no real scientific purpose, and that lab received funding from Tony Fauci's department at the National Institutes of Health. Again, the whole thing is a funding scam. It doesn't save children from pediatric cancer. It just kills beagles. So the scam was exposed, and the beagles are finally being freed.
There you
At
go.
least they're being freed now.
Yeah, because it got exposed to the public, and there was an uproar about it, and the beagles, they stopped torturing beagles for no purpose whatsoever.
They should have to give that money back or something. I mean, third.
Yeah, that money just sinks into the medical bureaucracy, and believe me, you're never going to see it again. It's just a horrible thing. But once again, if we could just move on to the next part of the highlight of this hearing.
Mr. Fauci, you also represent the type of science where you confess that you made up the COVID rules, including
I didn't hear what you
6
said.
feet social distancing and masking of children.
I never
You
said I made anything up.
You admitted that you made it up. You
I
made it
didn't
up as
say
you went.
I made it up.
So are you saying this is fake news, Mr. Fauci?
I didn't say I made anything up.
What did you say?
I said that it is not based in science and it just appeared.
But this is science.
What does dogs have to do with anything that we're talking about today?
These are scientific experiments. This is what you signed off on. But you also told the American people they had to distance by 6 feet. They had to wear masks.
Wow, I think it's amazing that the Pope of Science puts out this decree that he admits has no basis in science. And I think it was really funny, the inflection in his voice when he said, I never said that I made anything up. It's like he's outright stating that it was made up, but just not by me.
Yeah, and he absolutely admitted on top of that he knew that there was no scientific reason, no scientific evidence, no scientific basis for this social distancing whatsoever. His quote was even, well, we don't know whether it's 4 feet, 6 feet, 10 feet, but we just arrived. His exact words were, it just kind of popped up. It just was there, the number. And then Mr. Science says to the rest of the nation that and to allow the world that listened, that you have to be 6 feet apart.
Now, the next logical question is why? Why would he do that? And I really hope that they, at some point in these hearings, that's answered, because that's what I think everyone wants to know.
The hearings are going on, or they're ongoing, I mean to say. But it's more than just a hassle that you got to stand 6 feet apart while you're waiting in line at Walmart. It's because of standing 6 feet apart that businesses had to close. That is to say, social distancing. Mm-hmm. Schools had to close, putting children way behind in their education. And making it so that people can't attend funerals for their loved ones, can't attend church.
Can't even be in the room when their loved one is dying. People died alone.
People died alone because of his mandate that has nothing to do with science. If you didn't do it, then you were a bad person somehow, and you were a science denier, or a conspiracy theorist, or just just basically didn't care about anybody but yourself.
That's what frustrates me the most about all of this, is because during COVID, when they were saying all of this, what you just said about this is science, you got to follow the science. I kind of believed that there must be something behind what they're saying, but I still didn't care. I thought this is ridiculous. I don't care if it is the science. I don't want to. It's just like affecting my life and affecting my family, and it was affecting the whole world. The mood was down, and just everything felt so bad with all these stupid rules, and I didn't care if that's what the science said. And now that it's coming out and that he's admitting that there never was any science, it's a giant slap in the face, and all the people who made anyone feel bad about these things deserve to feel bad.
That's absolutely right. And yeah, it made everybody feel bad, including me, and it caused such things as these lockdowns, largely due to the social distancing. They caused all kinds of havoc. They're supposed to make people healthier somehow. They made a spike in alcohol abuse, a spike in drug abuse and addiction. They spiked suicide. In fact, the killer here, statistic that I look up, is they increased mental illness during these restrictions and lockdowns, especially among young people and women. Anxiety and depression being the most prevalent, leading to a spike in suicides, especially among preteens. That's kids ages 5 to 12.
Yeah, it was virtually unheard of before this for people that age committing suicide, and now I'm starting to hear it here and there about 10-year-olds and stuff. It's just awful.
Hey, can you imagine a 5-year-old committing suicide?
They don't even know. They would have no concept of that.
Yeah,
They shouldn't.
and it produced a spike in suicides among young adults too. And we're talking 18 to 24.
Mm-hmm.
And you had all these school closings, which again, they put children 2 years behind in their education, and which some of them are never going to catch up, especially disadvantaged people and minorities, which the Democrats and are the ones that they're supposedly looking out for. And some of the main symptoms, besides drug addiction, alcoholism, and all that other kind of stuff, and suicide, children that were forced to do stuff like wear masks and whatnot, reported such problems as behavioral problems, headaches, speaking difficulties. I mean, it's hard to learn for a kid to learn how to speak if they can't see anybody's words and the words are muffled.
I remember even hearing that like they couldn't see facial expressions either, so that caused emotional developmental issues as well as the language issues.
Think of the bonding and stuff that a child has with his mother and his family and even his friends and stuff like that. Then, of course, change of mood, and almost 30% of them were having breathing difficulties because of these masks and that sort of thing.
Those homemade cloth ones were awful, hot and sweaty, and you couldn't breathe through them.
Yeah, well, speaking on that, we're probably getting ahead of ourselves a little bit. Let's look at the next part of the hearing, and this is has to do with that sort of thing. If you would roll that, please.
Thank you. This was a time in history where you got to throw out the first pitch at the Washington Nationals baseball game, while Americans were forced to stay home and watch such events that they love from at home alone on their televisions. And what a hypocrisy this picture shows. Here you are without your mask, with empty seats everywhere. Remember the cardboard cutout fans? That was one of the most insulting things to Americans, having to watch the games from home where you got to go and enjoy the game and sit right next to people not following the 6 feet of distancing, not wearing your mask, and everyone else was forced to stay home and stop enjoying life. And your science here, your science is displayed perfectly in this picture where children in school were put in plastic bubbles because of your science, your repulsive, evil science. And let's go back to your very own email. You said earlier you don't use email. Oh, you do. Right here. This is your own email where you said the typical mask you buy in the drugstore is not really effective in keeping out virus. I do not recommend that you wear a mask. This is your email. This is your own words. But yet children all over America were forced to wear masks. Healthy children forced to wear masks, muzzled in their schools. And then they were forced to learn from home because of your so-called science and your medical suggestions, while you and all your cronies get paid from Big Pharma. You know that what this committee should be doing? We should be recommending you to be prosecuted. We should be writing a criminal referral because you should be prosecuted for crimes against humanity. You belong in prison, Dr. Fauci.
Strong words from her once again. But I'll tell you what, Chris, let's go through a couple of those pictures here just for a second. What about when he's sitting in their stands saying that the science says that we got to be socially distanced, right?
Mm-hmm.
He's sitting in the stands like two people flanking him, not even a seat apart. They're side by side. And
Yeah,
he's demanding the rest of the world social distance.
Yeah, and he didn't have his mask on either.
And he didn't have his mask on.
The thing, when the Fauci worshippers during the time who were trying to say, they always said, it's not a big deal. It's not a big ask to just wear a mask and to just stay home for a little while. Oh, first world problems that you can't go to the baseball game. But it was more than that. I remember the feeling that it felt like, it didn't feel like America anymore. It felt like this weird post-apocalyptic world where you see these weird scenes of cardboard cutout people at a baseball game on TV, and then you see kids in these little bubble pods, and
That's a big one for me.
and then you go, remember this when we went in the grocery store and you heard over the loudspeakers, please remain calm and everything is okay. And it was just weird, like a apocalypse movie. And I hated that feeling. And it was not as simple as just wear your mask, just do what you were told. It's not a big deal. You can't go on vacation for 1 year. Boo-hoo. No, they took our lives away from us, and I want to know why.
And you couldn't go to church, which just totally
Which
violates the
huge deal,
Constitution.
yes.
You couldn't assemble, which totally violates the Constitution. Oh, but you could go to BLM riots.
Yeah.
That was okay. Somehow that didn't matter. I guess at riots you don't catch or pass COVID.
No.
But if you wanted to go to church, if you wanted to go to a funeral, or if you wanted to protest the COVID restrictions, well, that's just too dangerous. And I remember a church group trying to hold their ceremony, their church meeting outside of the church in a friggin' parking lot that got busted up, and the pastor gets arrested for it.
Yep.
Outside. As I recall, they were wearing masks, which was silly in itself. And you go back to that picture of those kids. They're supposedly a band practice or orchestra or whatever, and they're in plastic enclosures. That makes me want to puke. I mean, and for what reason? No reason. They even admitted back in the day that the children were the least susceptible to COVID. They knew this. In fact, they knew all of this stuff. And they still made us jump through these hoops and do this anyway. For what?
Don't know.
I
I
know-
don't know what could be worth that. And it didn't. I mean, the data's already come out earlier before this that it didn't save any lives, hardly any, nominal amount.
It had little to no effect.
Yes.
I mean, there's various studies on the subject, but all of them agree that it really didn't do much of anything. And frankly,
Especially not the kids.
so yeah,
That part had no effect except on the children's lives.
and then lastly, Fauci pushed this narrative that there's no way that this came from a lab in China, right? There's no way. Even though in the beginning, almost from the start, there were lots of very credible scientists that said that was the case. He had meetings with scientists in the field, virologists, who said that this looks like it came from a lab. It does not look like it came from nature. I mean, I know there were people on the other side, but he ditched that right away. Why is that? I'll tell you why he ditched it right away. Because his institution, the NIH, they were funding some 60 experiments over in the Wuhan lab in China. They were funding gain of function research.
A coincidence.
Yeah. Fauci himself gave the reason why. He said, we've got to create viruses that can be transmitted to human beings so that we can battle viruses that can be transmitted to human beings. He freaking said that. That's a freaking head slap, man.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make any sense to anybody? And then he still to this day, and finally he's admitted, well, it could have come from a lab, but I'm not going to say either way, one way or another. He's finally admitted that much, considering that basically the consensus now among most people was, yeah, it came from the Wuhan lab. But I can sort of see if we find out, if we could absolutely prove for certain that it came from a Wuhan lab in China,
That he was helping to fund.
he was helping to it goes again. What are you going to do? What do we do with Fauci? The second thing is, what do we do with China? They started a pandemic that killed millions of people all over the world.
Mm-hmm.
What's the reaction of the world supposed to be to one of the greatest powers on the face of the earth? It's World War III. What are we going to do? We're going to punish them? What's going to happen? I can see why the powers that be don't want to blame it on China. I wasn't going to go into all this, but just think about it. What would be the response if it was proven? So I don't think anybody wants to absolutely prove China did it, because then what does the rest of the world do? They have to be punished. And nobody wants World War III. But at any rate, do you have any thoughts on that?
I guess maybe they could get around it by saying that it was an accident or something.
Even if it was an accident, that there has to be some kind of repercussion.
Yeah, and what would that be? You're right. I have no idea.
It seems to me they were trying to develop a biological weapon, which is illegal anyway. But anyhow, to start to wrap things up here, I got a video from a guy who's totally not on our side most of the time. In fact, like 99% of the time. If you could roll that last quick clip there, Skeeter.
What do you mean by that? Do you mean like
Well, so
this
here's
perhaps there's a chance that this was created in a lab? There's an investigation.
A chance?
Well, but
oh my
if there was
God.
evidence, I'd love to hear it. I
There's
just don't know.
a novel respiratory coronavirus overtaking Wuhan, China. What do we do? Oh, you know who we could ask? The Wuhan Novel Respiratory Coronavirus Lab. The disease is the same name as the lab. That's just a little too weird, don't you think? And then they ask the scientists, they're like, how did this, so wait a minute, you work at the Wuhan Respiratory Coronavirus Lab. How did this happen? And they're like, a pangolin kissed a turtle.
Oh, that's funny.
Yeah, it's absurd, but it's true. It makes sense. You got a lab over there that's creating these viruses, and you can't look at that as being the cause of it at all. No, that can't possibly happen. And it breaks out in Wuhan, exactly where the lab is, But no, it's got to be from a pangolin.
Yeah, it wasn't even in the next city or anything. It's just,
No, and I don't even know what a pangolin is.
oh, shouldn't you have learned from those videos have you done with Corden about animals?
Yeah, I don't pay attention to what it says. At any rate, this has been son and this time daughter of thunder. If you like this video, please hit like and subscribe. And even if you don't like it, hit it anyway. And please comment. If you have negative, positive, I don't care. Or if you have any suggestions for further videos. Happy day.